This is the Making Waves podcast. My name is Dave Rotman. We're here at Call to Freedom with Becky Rasmussen and Rachel Foltz. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, we're excited to be here, Dave.
Thank you for being on the program. And I'm sure our subscribers will be very interested to hear what you have to say. Could you tell us about Call to Freedom and more specifically what your positions are and what you do?
Absolutely. Becky Rasmussen established Call to Freedom as a nonprofit in 2016, and 2026 will be 10 years old as an agency, and established Call to Freedom to serve those that are impacted by human trafficking and commercial sexual exploitation. And never did I think that the journey would be the number of people walking through the doors and the need to be so great. We are nearly at 1,800 individuals that we've served that have walked through the doors in different capacities. And as we kind of unfold and do education and prevention, intervention, and restoration with those that are impacted, we've just learned so much about this issue from labor and sex trafficking that it's happening here in South Dakota, and the need is not slowing down by any means.
I was shocked when I heard about this. I mean, I'm from Northwest Iowa. I've lived in Sioux Falls for most of my life, and I knew that there was some issues, but the extent of it was...
Yeah. Well, when you think about South Dakota, I mean, you think about some of the poorest counties in the United States are located here with some of our tribal nations, which is definitely a vulnerability that leads into trafficking and other exploitations, as well as what we call familial trafficking, which is one of the most hidden and less talked about, but probably most common. 1 in 6 that walks through the doors of Call to Freedom have been impacted by familial trafficking, which is being trafficked by your own parents or guardians. And so that one's really hard to identify. We've worked really hard to do education to talk about first responders. How are we identifying what victimization is really happening within these individuals that are walking through the doors? And as we've done that, we're discovering a lot of kids that didn't even know that they were victims of trafficking. And prevention is a big piece of what we're doing now. And you'll hear Rachel talk about some of the legislation that we'll be carrying in that prevention piece, and as well as events. When we talk about Sturgis and hunting season, groups of people come, and when you have large groups of people, being men or women, there is the opportunity to facilitate trafficking as well as drug trafficking, human trafficking, and gun trafficking as well.
You've made a big impact and grown quite a bit in the past 10 years. I remember when we met in 2016.
Yeah, Dave. Yeah, we were all volunteers at that time in 2016 and actually formally hired 2 employees in November of 2017. And fast forward to today, Call to Freedom has 28 staff. We opened a Rapid City office that just opened last month. And we have Jesse out in Rapid City. So we will be serving that area as well as, I think we're going to see a lot of need out there, as well as Marissa's house, which we have been facilitating that since October of 2016. Built a new Marissa's house that in April 1st of 2022 that houses women and their children together, up to 36 individuals. And we get calls from all over the United States for that supportive housing piece. And we're one of 2% in the nation that actually offer housing for women survivors of trafficking as well as their children and reunify.
I'd like to dig into that just a little bit.
Absolutely.
Because I'm aware that how necessary that was. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but one of the reasons you have housing is because you need to keep these victims from going back into human trafficking because they have no other option. They have no other choice. So you get them out of the human trafficking and they find that they have no resources, they have no place to stay, and they end up going back to human trafficking voluntarily almost because they
don't know any other way to survive. I mean, if you think about a trafficker, it's a business, and so that trafficker will control every aspect of that victim's life. From their personal identification to where they live, to what they eat, how they dress. So they feel like if those basic needs and safety are not met in those initial stages, and when we talk about basic needs, housing is one of those. Being able to get a job, having your personal identification so you can do both of those are needed. But what we found in the process is if we cannot provide safety and basic needs right when that victimization or that individual's walking through the door is happening, those individuals will go back into trafficking. And that's where Marissa's house comes into part of our continuum of care model, where we are actually housing but equipping them to be self-sufficient through counseling as well as mental health. Addiction is a big part of what we do as well, and making sure that those services and support is in place for those individuals. And then teaching them how to budget, teaching them how to then become parents if that's part of their desire. And so Marissa's house is set up for that. We need more housing. We can't house, when we have 200, 300 plus individuals walking through the doors every year. Our unit only houses up to 36 and it's 12 apartments. So housing has always been a big issue. So we work a lot with domestic violence shelters too on that emergent piece when they're right coming out of that trafficking, that victimization, maybe from 30 to 90 days. We have to find out, what does safety look like? Is Sioux Falls or South Dakota or Rapid City a safe place for you? And if it's not, do we need to move you out of South Dakota to another area that you can feel safe so you can really focus on your healing process? And so we have that partnership with a lot of the domestic violence shelters, as well as some of those shelters for emergency, when you talk about Bishop Dudley and then also UGM. And then once we get through those 90 days, we talk about more stability.
Could you go a little bit into the safety issue? Because one of the issues, of course, is that the police, the government, has really no resources to help these people.
It's a tough issue. It requires a lot of investigation. It requires a lot of resources to come around. I mean, you got to track calls and phone logs. I've sat in on FBI interviews with clients, and clients who have trauma have to remember details. And if you've ever experienced trauma, you probably don't remember what you ate the day before, not alone when dates, times, and locations. Right. And so all of that kind of has to be in play for us to effectively prosecute these cases. And so really getting innovative of how we are looking at prosecuting these cases, working together, streamlining those processes, sharing information, because our fusion center is great, where we're sharing information from different communities because traffickers travel. So what happens in Minnehaha County? Are we sharing those, details with Pennington County or some of our rural communities? And those law enforcements are different. You have different sheriffs, you have different local law enforcement. And so these cases are really involved and hard to prosecute. We're really thankful for Attorney General, South Dakota Attorney General Marty Jackley, just some of the legislation he worked on in this last session, as well as, just trying to align some of those pieces that I'm talking about to have more prosecutions and more safety. But the reality is it isn't just one person in the trafficking situation. Typically you have groups of people that work together that facilitate trafficking because it's a business. So you could put one person behind bars, but you might have 3 or 4 more a part of that group that are still out and are still a safety factor for those that are coming forward and being courageous and just talking about that. And so it's much more in depth than I think people know.
So going a little bit more in depth, why are they a safety issue to the people who you've rescued?
Why is these groups?
Yeah, why do they need a safe area?
Sure. Well, I mean, if you think about it, if you don't feel safe, how can you think about getting a job, or how can you think about dealing with my trauma when you're constantly feeling unsafe? And the reality is safety also is a physical threat, a mental threat. And so it's really important to address that so those individuals can really focus on their healing and have the opportunity to be that specific focus and not have to worry about safety or basic needs.
And the traffickers try to get them back.
Oh, re-recruiting, yes. So we work with individuals that have been re-recruited back, or they're retargeted by different groups. These groups do communicate with each other, where they're sharing so-and-so just came out of trafficking, they're vulnerable still.
Right.
They will send in individuals that we call recruiters to be able to make connections and re-recruit them.
And track them down.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the safety factor sometimes is a perceived unsafety, sometimes it's a real legit threat. But the fact is, if you don't feel safe, you're not going to move forward with your healing process.
Rachel, could you talk to us a little bit about your future plans here? What legislation your plans on bringing in this coming session?
Yeah. So I have the privilege of serving as Call to Freedom's Director of Impact and Program Relations. And under the umbrella of impact, public policy is so critical to moving the needle on trafficking. And so when we think about trafficking as an issue too, is holistically, it was first defined in federal law in the year 2000. A lot has changed in the past 25 years as it relates to this issue, and chief among those changes is the tactics and the methods that traffickers are using to target, recruit, exploit people. And yes, I'm talking about digital spaces in particular. It's one of the biggest emerging threats in particular to young people today. And so we at Call to Freedom have always leaned on the lived experiences of those that we serve, our survivors, our clients, to say, what did your exploitation look like? And then because of that, what supports do you need? What do you not currently have at the supportive level in the state of South Dakota? And what does that look like? And so looking to public policy priorities for 2026 and beyond, bringing really some safety and guardrails to those digital spaces is one of our biggest priorities. And so we're looking at some legislation regarding App Store accountability is the terminology. Really just the reality right now is that a minor user, someone ages 0 to 17, they have access to smartphones these days. The average age has dropped to something like 7 years old in the United States. Kids are having smartphones. And so amidst that reality, what we're saying is right now the reality is that those minors can download any app on the App Store currently without parental knowledge or consent. And so we see that as a big barrier where parents and caregivers don't have the tools and the rights, quite frankly, that they need to be able to protect their children in digital spaces. So we're going to be talking with legislators about some legislation that's already passed in other states, including Texas and Utah and others, about just the simple fact that when a minor chooses to download an app, they need their parent or guardian's consent to do so, to enter into a legally binding contract with an app store and subsequently with those app developers as well.
So that's one piece of legislation. You have others. Yeah,
we're talking as well about the victim services funding landscape. We at Call to Freedom, we're a busy team. We served 527 clients in 2024. And like Becky was talking about, just that holistic continuum of care model that we provide to those individuals means it takes a lot of resources to provide them hope and healing on their own terms. Whether it's counseling session, safety planning, all of these different resources, it takes a lot of staffing support and it takes a lot of financial resources to be able to help those survivors get the resources that they need. A lot of the field historically has relied upon a federal pot of funding called the Crime Victims Fund, which is really cool because it doesn't rely upon taxpayer dollars. It's the actual fines and penalties of those federally convicted of crimes. So all of those fines and penalties are put into a pool called the Crime Victims Fund and then disseminated out through formula grants to other states across the union, including South Dakota. But it's depleted at such a rate that nonprofits like Call to Freedom and others are really having a hard time sustaining through that fund alone. And so we at Call to Freedom have been looking for many years about how do we continue to diversify our funding and get our message out about why the need is so great that, you know, amidst a 65% reduction in Crime Victims Fund funding, we're serving 25% more people year over year. You know, that math doesn't square. So it takes a lot of resources. So we're just having conversations too at the state level about why is Call to Freedom and so many other victim services nonprofit, why are we a good investment? Why do we believe that it's one piece of the puzzle? And really critically, what are the fiscally conservative and really innovative solutions to building sustainable funding for victim service providers across the state of South Dakota?
And this is quite important. Even though we're a small state, there is quite a bit of trafficking in South Dakota.
Yeah, crazy amounts. You know, and we would say we even currently are barely scraping the surface as far as this issue. It's pretty linear when you engage in increased awareness and education efforts that the amount of people who are learning and hearing about it for the first time, it causes a deep self-reflection to be like, man, I didn't realize that was trafficking. I maybe didn't even realize that it wasn't okay to go through. That you imagine a lot of our clients, when you dive into the data too, child sexual abuse is one of the biggest indicators and vulnerabilities that link to trafficking into adolescence or adulthood. And so when you think about someone who's experienced nothing but abuse beginning at age 0, their whole life, they don't know what a healthy, supportive, stable household or relationship looks like, you can pretty kind of easily make that jump then to say that they're hearing about it for the first time, and maybe just that simple truth that no, that's not what love looks like. It's not okay. And that there is a place that's free. The doors are always open to you here at Call to Freedom to get the help that you need. You see a lot of people come forward, disclose, and want to make that connection with us as we engage in increased awareness and education efforts.
And there's a third piece of legislation you plan on bringing?
Yeah, we've been approached by a couple of really passionate legislators regarding the issue of child marriage, where they kind of just asked, forced marriage is kind of intertwined in a component of the human trafficking landscape as well, where very regrettably you'll see traffickers misuse and abuse the institution of marriage. That trafficking at its core relies upon control and coercion. They have to control their victims in any way possible, by any means possible. And so in the context of a child, marriage, regrettably, can be one of those methods by which they exert control. That if you marry this child, that child then loses a lot of resources and legal rights and almost immediately. I think, for example, that trafficker becomes the legal guardian of the minor upon marrying him or her. And so what that means then for this kid in this marriage, they can't actually get help at a domestic violence shelter, for example, because they're under the age of 18 and unaccompanied. You can't accept, many times, an unaccompanied minor into your shelter. And so where is this child to go if they're experiencing physical or sexual abuse? You think about their medical care. You know, if they go to a hospital saying, hey, I need a forensic exam, I need XYZ, they too, it's the same thing. What do their legal rights look like? Seeking a divorce, they can't until they reach the age of majority at 18. So you're trapped if you're allowed to marry at age 16. What does that child do but suffer from ages 16 to 18 until there's even a glimmer of possibility of escaping that? And so I do, on this point, want to be very clear that Call to Freedom is a faith-based organization. We were founded in Becky's heart and all of the hearts of myself and our whole team. We do what we do out of a deep love and fidelity to God, and we celebrate the institution of marriage as one of God's greatest creations. So we believe that it's possible to honor the institution of marriage in all that it is and all the way that God designed it to be, while still saying, but it's not at the expense of kids. And we can hold both of those truths together at the same time to say they're not mutually exclusive. And we think there's a path forward that protects kids but honors the institution of marriage. So we at Call to Freedom, too, are just really eager to get our mission and message out to the general public, but especially to those who have a stake in this issue, legislators and public policy professionals, chief among those. My inbox and door is always open, so feel free to reach us at calltofreedom.org. You can find more information about our phone numbers and email addresses to get into contact with us. We're highly collaborative, and we don't mean that cheaply or surface level. We really want to find solutions that are workable for all to the betterment of all South Dakotans. As we talk about how to better serve South Dakotans and, regrettably, those who are impacted by trafficking, abuse, and exploitation, what does that look like? We want to be a thought partner, a collaborative partner to everyone who's trying to move the needle on this issue and just do some good. And so please reach out to us to have those conversations, to talk about ideas or changes, tweaks, things that are needed. That's where our heart is, and our goal is really to help serve survivors and just honor them in the way that they deserve.
How can people learn a little bit more about human trafficking in South Dakota?
Absolutely. One of our core events that we hold under the awareness kind of umbrella is something we call our informational luncheon. We host one once every quarter, with the next upcoming January 15th at 11:30 a.m. Folks can find out more information on our website and register at calltofreedom.org under the events tab. We just encourage everyone to come out, have lunch provided by us, and to learn more about this issue. But really critically, what does it actually look like in South Dakota? What are the trends? How do we kind of unpack this really complicated issue? Really powerfully, you'll hear the stories of real clients that were served by Call to Freedom that I think just puts it into such a deeper perspective, really, and humanizes the issue. And so we're really always excited to host everyone so that they can come, learn more, learn how to join the fight against trafficking, to get involved. So again, January 15th at 11:30 a.m. We would love to see you all there.
I'll put a link in the description, and I can testify that that's a very good way of getting to know Call to Freedom and the whole issue. That's how Becky and I met.
That's right. The bakery is our first connection, wasn't it? And I so appreciate you, Dave, the fact that you heard this issue and saw the importance of it. And, you know, our initial connection to legislators was developed by you. So thank you for being an advocate for Call to Freedom, but also this issue for those that we serve.
Yeah, that was some time ago. And you're welcome. I recall we were at the bakery, and there was a meeting going on. I was working there. And anywhere there's coffee and Wi-Fi, I can work. And there was something going on in the adjoining room, and I kind of wandered over to find out what was going on. And actually, your security guy, Jeff, actually came and talked to me. And because I was sitting there, we kind of were eyeing each other up, and we went over there and realized what was going on. I heard your story, and I listened to one of your things, and you know what? I said, Becky, you need to meet some legislators. And I started inviting legislators over for your luncheon.
Yes, you did.
And that was a good connection, I think.
Oh, it absolutely started the work that we did, 9 years ago, and legislation that passed, and each year. So thank you so much for that. And legislators continue to reach out to us and ask questions.
That was important to them, too, because then they understand the issue. And so when you drop a legislation in front of them, they can say, oh, what is this issue? And I don't even know what this, Becky, hi, how are you? And have you talked about this, or you explained this to them? And I think that's a really good connection anybody should make, especially in politics.
Yeah. I think we need to know what's happening within our communities and get a full picture of the good and sometimes the not so good. But we are so grateful, like Rachel said, and we'll reiterate that without legislation, without that support, we can't move the needle on this issue. And we need not only legislators and community members to come along, we need everybody to be a part of this fight to be effective in combating this.
Becky, what can people do? What can listeners of this podcast do to get involved? I mean, you might have reached some people and they want to know, how can I help?
Yeah. I remember when the Lord gave me this call to start Call to Freedom, one of the first things he said was, unite a community. And I didn't know what that meant until people that had passion and wanted to make a difference started walking through the doors. And Call to Freedom has been very intentional about creating room for people to be involved with this issue. And that could be on the donor base, where if you have resources, obviously we need funding. You can go to calltofreedom.org. But if you feel called to this issue and want to volunteer, right now we have over 80 ambassadors that go across the state, and they provide our pull tabs, and they go to rest stops, they go into their community and make sure those pull tabs are in every bathroom. Yeah, absolutely. And 80 volunteers are involved with that process, and the amount of referrals and also awareness that has come from that. We've had individuals that they've read those questions and answered yes and called us and said, am I a victim of trafficking? And begin to self-identify, which is very normal within this population and this victimization. So we have plenty of opportunities for volunteering, from individuals that move our clients to individuals that do grocery shopping, people that are wrapping presents today as we're talking, as well as right in the next room. So if you hear a little more activity, that's why. But we have the best volunteers. We have 250 people right now that are actively volunteering for Call to Freedom. We would not be Call to Freedom without our volunteers and without our community. So go to calltofreedom.org. You can go under volunteer, get involved page. Look at what opportunities are there, fill out an application, and Reno will reach back to you, set up an interview, have a conversation, find out what passion you have, and get you connected to Call to Freedom. This is not a Call to Freedom issue. This is a community issue. We need our communities, from our legislators to our volunteers, to our law enforcement, to our first responders and other areas, to come forward and be a part of this movement that we need to get to those that are impacted by human trafficking. So we say we welcome you, and we thank you in advance for getting involved.
Do you still accept household good donations?
Absolutely, yeah. Yep, we have a list on our website, calltofreedom.org, where we have just different things that we need, from clothing to food to household items, and you can just refer to that list. We have an Amazon list where people can order certain things for our occupational therapists and be able to get those right off of Amazon, shipped to Call to Freedom. If you are looking to adopt an organization or a nonprofit around Christmas, we welcome you. We ask you to look at that Amazon list and get involved.
Rachel, do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, we just say thank you for your time and attention and on this issue. Whenever somebody is willing to learn and engage with something like human trafficking, we deeply appreciate it, because I say all the time that the natural reaction to a tragedy of this magnitude is to bury your head in the sand or to look away. And that's what traffickers are counting upon, is us to do nothing, to look away, to ignore, to downplay, to deny. Trafficking is happening here in South Dakota in every corner, in every community, from Flandreau to Humboldt, from Sioux Falls to Rapid. It's everywhere. And so it takes a village to make a difference. And so wherever your talents are, whatever time you can give, whatever attention you can give to this issue, there's a place for you in this movement here at Call to Freedom and in the anti-trafficking movement at large. And so we thank you, and we just welcome you into the fold and into the fight against trafficking. So thank you.
And I would just encourage you to join us at the informational luncheon and learn about the work of Call to Freedom. I think one of the things that I get calls from all over the United States. I got a call from Louisiana yesterday saying, will you bring Call to Freedom to our community? And God has birthed something here in South Dakota that I believe will eventually affect nations and impact other states. And so please get involved. We would not be at the organization we are without our community. And it continues to be volunteers, people coming behind us, our employees, our donors that are making the difference. So go to calltofreedom.org and get connected. We would love to invite you into the fight.
Well, thank you. You're doing God's work.
Thank you.
This has been the Making Waves podcast. My name is Dave Rutman. We've been here with Rachel Foltz and Becky Rasmussen.